Good morning, everyone. My name is Robert Pleasant. I'm the Director of Student Services for the Southern Campus. I want to welcome you all to this event and welcome you to our campus. Some of you were here, I think, last week as well for our Explore Ohio event, so we're glad you came back a second time. I do want to remind everyone, if you could silence or turn off your cell phones. If you do that now, take a minute to do that. Make sure they're off or silent so they don't disturb the presentation. But today, we gather to celebrate and honor the rich culture and contributions of Native Americans. Native American Heritage Month reminds us of the importance of understanding and appreciating the traditions, stories, and customs that have been passed down through generations. Let us use this occasion to learn, appreciate, build bridges and understanding. Our diversity, our understanding of history makes us stronger as a nation. And by coming together, we can create a more inclusive future. Again, I want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank Dawson Bryant School District. I think all of you are with Dawson Bryant, so give yourselves a hand. Thank you all for being here and your leaders. But most importantly, I want to thank Mr. Dan Harmon for his willingness to facilitate today's conversation and this event. And I'm hoping, Dan, that we can do more events like this in the future. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Mr. Harmon.
I feel like I've come back home because this is where I went to school at and graduated from back quite a few years ago. But I want to thank Robert and Ohio University for allowing me to come down here on this beginning of Native American Month and speak to you about some Native American things that probably don't hear a whole lot about. But we're going to give you some history on it today, and some things you're going to hear will be tough to hear, but they're things that are true. Things that you're going to hear are going to be things that I love our country, but our country towards the Native Americans has done some things that are not very acceptable at all. But I'll go over and give you some of that information and during the presentation. And like I said, you'll hear some things that be kind of hard to understand, but I'll help you out with it. I'd also like to thank my daughter who's here. Sarah Simmons works here in marketing. She helped me get a lot of this stuff set up, and so for all the work that she's done. Hannah Russell, one of our history teachers. We could have never done this without her. She took care of all the paperwork and getting everybody put together and typed everything up, and I guarantee she put hours of time in, and I appreciate it. And the rest of our teachers, we got some really good history teachers. Derek Parsons is here, and Adam Jenkins is here. I think Aaron Rice will probably be here in a little bit, and then we have several others that come along to help in case we need anything. I appreciate all them. I guess if we're going to talk a little bit about Lakota, the Lakota tribe, if you hear, a lot of you, if you hear anything about Native American, you probably hear the term Sioux, the Sioux Indians. They're the Lakota. They're not the Sioux. Sioux is a derogatory term that was given to the Lakota by George Armstrong Custer. Sioux actually means snake in the grass. And so if you go to the reservation, Pine Ridge or Rosebud or any of those that are Lakota reservations, and you use the term Sioux, they're not going to be real happy. So if you ever go to one, remember they're a Lakota. But I guess I could do an introduction in Lakota. If you ever watched the old films, cowboy and Indian shows and stuff, Hollywood missed everything. They didn't get any of it right. Probably only one thing that got right was you'd see them hold a hand up and say, how. Actually, how in Lakota means hello. So with that, I'll say, how. Dayawa Chiwanki. Do carry on. Machi Op-E, Dan Harmon. That's just Lakota for hello. It's good to see you. How's everybody doing? My name is Dan Harmon. So that's a little bit of Lakota. Anytime you hear a foreign language, it's like, wow, what did they just say? But that's some Lakota. I grew up here in Ironton, so this is my hometown, but in the summers, my dad would always take us to Cherokee in North Carolina, and we would spend our summers down there. He would preach at the Cherokee Baptist Church, and me and the rest of my family, we'd run to creek banks and do all that, hunt crawdads and stuff like that. That's what we did in the summer. But I always thought I wanted to go to Cherokee and live there. Well, 13 years ago, I actually moved to Cherokee and lived on the reservation for 2 years. I taught high school down there. I coached basketball and softball, and a lot of great memories. And I remember our first day of basketball practice, I got to know some of the kids already. But we had 2 kids. One was named Jesse Tonita, and the other was Darius Thompson. And we're just doing conditioning on that first day, so we're taking a water break. And Jesse comes up to me and he says, "You know we play FIDCS basketball here." So I thought, what? I'd coached basketball at Rock Hill. I coached at St. Joe. I coached at Northwest. I'd never heard of FIDCS basketball. And so him and Darius kind of chuckled and said, what that means is first end in down court shoots. So that's how we played. We played fast. We had a team that went to the Sweet 16 in North Carolina. We averaged a lot of points. We got a shot off about every 15 seconds. A lot of the freshmen I coached, after I came back here when my granddaughter was born, finished in the Elite Eight in North Carolina, averaged 92 points a game in high school, and set a North Carolina record for the most three-point shots made in high school. So that's FIDCS, first end in down court shoots. You get across the half court, you better be ready to let it fly. So history's a story, and there's a reason behind every story. One thing will lead to another, that will lead to another, and that's how history is. History's lived every day. So I'm going to take you all the way back to 1876 to a guy that I just mentioned a minute ago. His name was George Armstrong Custer. The United States at this time was expanding west and taking more land and wanted the resources and everything. So they were forcing the Native Americans out. In particular, when they got out west and they run into the Lakota tribes and the Cheyenne and Comanche and the Apache and a lot of the tribes that are Plains tribes, they were trying to force them out. They wanted to get into the Black Hills. If you've ever been to the Black Hills, it's an area that is full of resources and full of gold, and that's what they were after. They wanted to get up in there and get some of that. They tried to buy the Black Hills from the Lakota. They had taken all this land, but they signed a treaty with the Lakota called the Fort Laramie Treaty, and in that treaty, the Black Hills was awarded to the Lakota. Well, the United States wanted to buy it. They offered them $6 million plus $440,000 a year for mining rights. And the Lakota refused to take it because they said, the land's not for sale. To them, the Black Hills was called Pahasapa, which means sacred land. And to this day, the Black Hills is still very sacred. In 1980, the Supreme Court set aside $105 million for what had been taken from the Black Hills and put it in a trust for the Lakota, and they still refused to take it. Today, 2023, that has grown to $1.5 billion, and it's sitting in a trust, and the Lakota won't touch it because they say that land is not for sale. United States, however, are still going into the Black Hills. And today, on this day, right now, they're mining uranium out of the Black Hills. So they're doing whatever they want to do and not even paying attention to the history of the Lakota and what is sacred to them. They're just going and taking what they want and thinking that it's okay. So then, as I said, here comes where they're wanting to take all the land. Along comes George Armstrong Custer, who graduated from West Point, and he was 34th in his class. There were only 34 that graduated. So he was last in his class. But he was a good fighter in the Civil War, and earned the confidence of General Sheridan. And so he was going to use Custer to try to force some of the Indians out and force the Lakota out. So George Armstrong Custer was an Indian hater. So he was going to go in and force the people out. Good fighter, but not real smart. He had 600 people in his battalion, and it was the 7th Cavalry. Keep in mind that it's the 7th Cavalry because as we get down the road 15 years from now, that 7th Cavalry is going to come into play again. But George Armstrong Custer is leading the 7th Cavalry. He splits it up into three groups. He keeps a couple hundred with him, a couple hundred goes this way, a couple hundred goes that way, and they're going to attack the Lakota. Well, George Armstrong Custer, as he comes up over the hill, he sees where the Lakota are camping. He never dreamed that there would be the size of the Lakota that he had seen. There were probably 10,000 of them there. He's got 200 people with him, 600 total, and he's looking at 10,000 people. So he sends one of his people that was with him to go get one of the other groups and tell them to come back and meet them because they were way outnumbered and they were going to need everybody they could get. But in the meantime, Custer's he's going to go ahead and attack anyway. What he didn't realize was the Lakota was being managed by a guy named Sitting Bull. Sitting Bull was 45 years old at this time. He wasn't fighting in the fight, but he was directing. And so a genius, Sitting Bull was. But he also had with him 2 warriors that were chiefs, one called Red Cloud and one called Crazy Horse. Crazy Horse may have been maybe the best warrior, strongest warrior that there was. So he goes to attack, and there's, like I said, he had 200 people with him. Less than an hour, every one of them is dead. Every one. They've all been killed. And some of the ones from the other 2 groups ended up being killed also. And there were a few that were left that scattered and took off. And again, we'll come back to them because they will make up the 7th Cavalry that we'll talk about here in a little bit that went to Wounded Knee. So anyway, he's killed them, and Custer himself was one of the last ones to die. And I've heard 12 different stories on how Custer died. But the one from doing research that I think that I see the most of comes from a woman warrior. Her name was Buffalo Road Calf Woman. She rode in the battle because she was fighting with her husband and her brother who were fighting in this battle too. And she rode in and she seen an opportunity, and she, with a spear, knocked Custer off his horse and killed him. That's one of the 12 stories you'll hear. That's the one that I see the most of and hear the most of, that this mighty George Armstrong Custer, ended up, dying in the battle. And Chief Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse, now they leave. Crazy Horse heads towards Nebraska, where a year later he was killed by the United States Army. Sitting Bull went to Canada, took a group of the Lakota with him, and went to Canada. United States promised him, said, if you will come back and turn yourself in and surrender, we will provide you a place and feed your, all the people that are with you. And Sitting Bull refused for the longest time. He didn't want to come back. He was going to stay where he was at. Well, eventually, they were starving. The people that were with him were starving. The white man, what they wanted to do was take away the culture of the Native American. And how do you beat them, they said? We'll starve them out. So how were they going to starve them out? They were going to kill the buffalo. At one time, there were 600 million buffalo that roamed the plains. And it got all the way down to about 500 before they were able to stop the killing and have built the buffalo back up some. But the Native Americans used buffalo for food, clothing, shelter, tools, weapons, anything and everything you can think of. That's what they used it for. So the white man thought, if we take away the buffalo, we'll take away the culture of the Native Americans. One other thing they wanted to do, they took the little kids out of the homes and sent them to boarding schools. I don't know if you've ever heard of a boarding school, but not a good place. And that's what they would do. They'd send them. I was in Montana, and I met this guy. His name was Joe, and he told me a story about his grandfather, who was taken out at the age of 10 out of the home and put in a boarding school in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. So he's coming from Montana to Carlisle, Pennsylvania, which is about 2,000 miles away. He's there about a week, and he runs. He wanted out of there. What were they doing? They cut your hair. Native Americans typically will have long hair. It's part of their culture. They cut the hair, took the clothes away from them, gave them a white man's name, and so he ran. He's going to find his way back to Montana. He's 10 years old. I mean, it's hard to imagine a fourth grader traveling 2,000 miles on his own, finding his way back home. But he takes off, and he hops trains and everything in the world. It took him about 30 days, and he made it back to Montana. Now, what did he eat? He was eating out of garbage cans. Anything he could find, he was eating. His grandson even said at one time he found a dead rat and ate it. Was just eating anything he could eat just to survive. He made it back to Montana. 2 days later, there's the U.S. Army knocking on their door again. They're coming to get him. He runs out the back door into the woods and hides and stays hidden for a couple days, and finally they leave and go back, and he never did have to go back to the school. There was another story that I was told. This lady was taken at the age of 6 and put in a boarding school. She's there. She knows some of the kids that are there. She's got some friends that are there. She comes down one day for breakfast, and she's sitting there with her friend, and she looks at her friend, and she says, "Niha ampete wate. Niha ampete wate." One of the supervisors there come and grabbed her by the arm, jerked her up out of her chair, drug her to the back, one of the back rooms, and she was beaten to within an inch of her life. What she said was "Niha ampete wate." She was saying to her friend, "Happy birthday." That's all she's saying. But she was saying it in the Lakota language, and the white people wanted to take the language away, not just cut your hair, take your clothing. They wanted to strip you of your language and everything. Because there's a saying, kill the Indian, save the man. So they're saying if they can take your culture away from you and make you white, then you're going to be okay. And that's what they were trying to do. She said happy birthday to her friend. You had 6, 7, 8-year-old kids there. And like I said, jerked her out took her to the back and beat her to within an inch of her life. 2 years ago, that lady told me, she said, to this day, I refuse to speak the Lakota language to anybody because I'm scared to death that a white person will hear me and beat me for speaking the Lakota language. This is stuff Native Americans have dealt with since the Europeans come to America and started taking the land and the minerals and all that. When I was in Montana, I went to the Battle of Little Bighorn. And this is the first monument that I came upon. And it's kind of hard to see. It says, to the officers and soldiers killed, to them have wounds received in action in the territory of Montana while clearing the district of the Yellowstone of hostile Indians. So they have come to Montana around Yellowstone, and they're taking the land, they're burning the places, the teepees and stuff that they're living in, because the Lakota, being a plains tribe, traveled like nomads. So they're killing their families, the wives and the children, and burning the homes and taking everything there. But yet they're calling the Native American hostile. They call the Native American savages because they protect their family and because they protect what they own and what was theirs that the white man was trying to take. So that's the first monument I've seen whenever I went into the Battle of Little Bighorn. And I was just like, you got to be kidding me. This is what you have? But as you go on and throughout, it's really, you see a lot of headstones and stuff, and they have every marking is a place where somebody had died at on the battlefield. There was this thing called a ghost dance, and there was a Paiute warrior, shaman, medicine man, that did the ghost dance. The white man feared the ghost dance because they found out what he said. He had a dream, and what the ghost dance stood for. What was that? If you performed a ghost dance, the buffalo would come back. It was narrowed to like 500, but if you do the ghost dance, the buffalo will return. The ancestors will return, and the white man will leave. So the white man was scared of this dance. And there was no truth in that dance at all, because the buffalo weren't coming back on their own. The ancestors weren't coming back on their own. But Wovoka would do this dance. Well, when Sitting Bull came back from Canada, and the United States captured him, and they put him on the Standing Rock Reservation, the Lakota were doing some dances. And the Native Americans do a lot of dances. They weren't doing the ghost dance. They were just doing a dance. But one of the officers there at Standing Rock called his top people and said, they're doing the dance, they're doing the dance. So the white people panicked, and they said, I want you to arrest Sitting Bull and take him in custody. So they come to Standing Rock, and they go to arrest Sitting Bull. Well, he doesn't want to be arrested. He wasn't doing nothing that was wrong. So he kind of resists being arrested. One of his followers pulled out a gun and shot the officer that was trying to arrest him. Well, immediately an officer pulled out a gun and shot and hit Sitting Bull in the chest. And then another officer shot and hit him in the head and killed him instantly. So now Sitting Bull is dead. And it just erupted a fight there at the Standing Rock Reservation that all because of something that the white people were afraid of that wasn't happening that they thought was happening. So what do they do now? They want to go after a guy named Spotted Elk. Spotted Elk was Sitting Bull's half brother. So they're gonna, I mean, they wanna go and they wanna take down all the chiefs and everything. Well, Spotted Elk had a band of 350 people with him. He was dying of pneumonia on his deathbed, could hardly move, but he's gonna take his people to Pine Ridge, where Red Cloud has invited him to come because they've got food there and could nurse some of them back to health. Well, on the way, he gets about 20 miles from Pine Ridge, and they camp at the Wounded Knee Creek. And as I said, Spotted Elk is on his deathbed. Now, if you research and some of these names and everything, you'll find out that the white people seem like they enjoyed giving some of the leaders different names and everything. Just like Sitting Bull. Sitting Bull's real name was Tatanka. But the white man will give you a different name. Well, they gave Spotted Elk the name Bigfoot because he had a big foot. So they call him Chief Bigfoot. So whenever you read and everything, and you're reading and it says it's talking about Chief Bigfoot, who it's really talking about is Chief Spotted Elk, which was the half-brother of Sitting Bull. Well, the 7th Cavalry, which was the one that was all the way back with George Armstrong Custer, comes riding in. So they come to the camp where the Lakota are camping out. And James Forsyth is leading them. So he comes in and he looks for Spotted Elk. And he tells him, I want you to disarm all your men, everybody. I don't want. So they pile up all their guns. So now they're unarmed. There was one Lakota that was deaf. His name was Black Coyote. Black Coyote didn't hear the call to disarm and lay your guns down, turn your weapons in. So he still has his gun. So when two of the officers see that there's a Native American that still has their gun, they go to wrestle it away from him. In doing so, in wrestling it away from him, the gun goes off. As soon as it goes off, the 7th Cavalry starts firing on 350 unarmed men, women, and children. A lot of the elders, little kids, and then they start running. They start running everywhere. I've been to Wounded Knee, gosh, I couldn't tell you how many times. I've walked the field where the massacre happened. I've walked Wounded Knee Creek. Whenever it happened in 1890, December 29th, 1890, the creek was still flowing really well and everything. You walk it now, there's no water left in the creek, but you can follow it just from the tree line. And so, I would walk the fields and I would cross where the Army set up their Hotchkiss guns, because I think they had it planned. They had planned a massacre, and they had everything ready to go, and they're firing the guns. There were 26 of the cavalry that got shot and died because it was friendly fire. They were shot by their own people because they just started firing. People were running everywhere. Little 4, 5, 6-year-old kids running towards the creek to hide behind the trees and the shrubs and everything so they could try to get away. There were some mothers that had kids that were trying to get away. And after so long, the firing finally stopped. And an interpreter that spoke both Lakota and English called out to the ones that were hiding that it's safe, the shooting's over, you can come back now, and you can come in, and we will take you to Pine Ridge. We will get you some food. We'll get you some things to help your health out and get you better. So you got little 4 and 5 and 6-year-old kids that are coming out from the trees and the shrubs and everything. And they say, here, we'll line you up here because we're going to put you on wagons and take you into Pine Ridge. Well, they lined them up here. Just like these young men right here are lined up. And then the 7th Cavalry, as brave as they are, pulled their guns and shot and killed these 4 and 5 and 6-year-old little kids. Why? Because they hated Native Americans. And the 7th Cavalry in 1876 had lost a battle to Sitting Bull and the Crazy Horse at the Battle of Little Bighorn. So they have had revenge on their mind for 14, 15 years. And they seen the opportunity, and they took it. And in doing so, not only did they slaughter everybody there, they killed 4 and 5, 6-year-old kids. There was one lady who was running during the original shooting and everything. She had a 4-month-old baby, and she had it in her papoose that they carry kids in. And she's running towards the Wounded Knee Creek, and she's shot in the back. And as she's shot in the back, she falls to the ground. From her hands and knees, she crawls to the Wounded Knee Creek. When she gets to the creek, she gets a rock and she starts digging out a hole. She gets a hole dug out, and she takes that 4-month-old baby and she lays it in the hole. As soon as she gets it laid in the hole, she fell over the hole dead. So she's covering that hole with her body, but now she is dead. It's 3 days later, on January 1st, 1891, the United States Army comes back to the field there, where the massacre was at, to pick up the dead bodies. The night before, there was a big snowstorm. It's 40 degrees below zero. So the bodies are frozen to the ground. They're having to pry the bodies loose, and they're having to pry the bodies loose to get them loaded up to take them to a mass gravesite where they're going to bury them. This here, the lady with the glasses on, is Sitting Bull's granddaughter. I was in South Dakota. This was about 3 years ago. She taught at the school there, and she taught the Lakota language. And I haven't talked to her for a couple years. She was approaching 80 at that time and still teaching. And she had come up with some health problems. And the last 6 weeks of school, she was out sick. And I was supposed to have an interview with her, and we were going to sit down and talk about her grandfather, who she never met. He had already died before she was born. But stories that she knew, and where she had got sick, she was having to move 120 miles away to where she could get better care. So instead of getting to do an interview with her, me and a buddy of mine ended up taking a box truck, and we loaded up all her furniture and moved her. So that's what we did that day. Ended up loading up couches and chairs and tables and moved her 120 miles away, which was fine too. Whether you got to do an interview or not, we got her to where she needed to go. But she is, and then this is her son, and then those are his kids. So they're all descendants of Sitting Bull. When I put this together, that should say spotted elk, but I'm not the best on some of those things. So it went down as, I think I was thinking about Black Coyote, who was the deaf guy that still had his gun. So back to the lady that ran and dug out the hole and laid her child in it and fell over it dead. Well, now the Army is here. They're prying the bodies loose from the ground because they're frozen to the ground, and they're loading them on a wagon. And they get towards the creek, and they say, well, there's a body, and they start to pry it loose, and they hear a little whimper. And they're like in shock that they're hearing this. So they pry her body loose, and underneath her was that 4-month-old baby that was still in that hole, was still alive. Had been there for 3 days, no food, no water. Only thing that kept her from the severe temperatures and weather was that her mom had fell over the hole and kept it covered up as she died. A guy named Leonard Colby, who was part of the Army, came along and said, we need to get this baby and get it to Pine Ridge and get it some nursing where, we can maybe save the baby. So they loaded her up, took her to Pine Ridge, where some of the elders gave her the name Zinkala Nooney and nursed her back to health. Well, this guy, Leonard Colby, decided he wanted to adopt her. So he's going to adopt the Native American baby. If you don't read on from there, you're going to think, wow, pretty good guy. He's wanted to take care of this little girl. But Leonard Colby had other ideas. Him and his wife, Clara, they adopt Zinkala. They put her in a glass encasing and display her. And then people would go by and pay $1 to see the little Indian baby. And that's what he was using her for. They kept her and did that with her for several years as she grew. At the age of 12, and this is one of the toughest, has to be one of the toughest people that ever lived. She dropped a lantern and it broke. Well, Leonard Colby, it made him mad. I don't know if it was his favorite lantern or what it was, but he got a whip and he whipped her with a whip. She was with some of her friends, and he whipped her so hard that the blood poured down her legs and turned her legs completely red. At that age, I think she was right around 12, she refused to cry because she was not going to cry in front of her friends and satisfy him by him making her cry in front of her friends. So she took a whipping from a whip, cut her skin, bled, covered her whole legs in blood, and she refused to cry. At the age of 15, Leonard Colby got her pregnant. The child was stillborn. Then at the age of 19, she finally was able to get away from that family, and she went to California. She married twice, and she had 2 different kids. And those kids, I did the math on their age and everything. If those kids had kids, then there's a possibility that she has grandkids somewhere in California. And if she does, I would love to be able to research and find out who they are and just go and sit down and talk with them. How much they would know about their mom. Probably not a lot, because she died at the age of 29. The Spanish flu took her out, and she died at the age of 29. She was buried in California, but there was a group from Wounded Knee that got together and said, we need to go and petition to exhume her body and bring it back to Wounded Knee. So they got some funds together, and a group of them went to California, and they met with whoever they needed to meet with, and they were able to get the body, have it exhumed. They brought it back to Wounded Knee and buried it at the memorial. I think I have a picture of the memorial here somewhere. That's the mass grave site. The United States just dug out a big grave and threw 300 Lakota people in there, and that's where they buried them. Now, if you ever go to Wounded Knee and go to the memorial, you'll see, which of course this is covered, you'll see the memorial, and right to the right, the first grave right outside of the memorial is Zinkala Nooney's, where they brought her back and buried her there. Now, there's a lot of other graves there now, and they're mostly descendants of the ones who are buried in the mass grave. Now, you think when you visit a graveyard around here, a cemetery, usually they're kept up pretty well. Grass is cut, they're pretty neat. When you go to Wounded Knee, the grass is high, and it stays high because the Native Americans believe when you're buried, go back to the way the ground was meant to be and the way it is, and let the grass grow, let everything grow around it, and that's just the way it is. I mean, before I knew that, I thought, gosh, why doesn't somebody clean this up? Cut the grass. But that's not the way the culture is. So if you ever go to Wounded Knee and you see that, you'll understand why. During this massacre in the 7th Cavalry, here's your definition of a Medal of Honor. Congressional Medal of Honor was given to the highest U.S. military decoration awarded by the Congress to a member of the armed forces for gallantry and bravery in combat at the risk of life above and beyond the call of duty. There were 20 medals of honor handed out to the 7th Cavalry, who slaughtered unarmed men, women, and children. That's not how you earn a Congressional Medal of Honor. There's a lady named Deb Hyland who is in Congress now, and she's a Lakota lady, maybe the only Native American that's in Congress. And she has petitioned Congress several times to have these medals of honor rescinded, and Congress refuses to. They will never rescind them because Native American history is a black eye to the United States. And like I said, I love our country, but our country has done a lot of things to Native Americans that are totally, totally unaccepted. And it wasn't until almost the year 2000 that the United States verbally apologized for what happened at Wounded Knee, but it was just we're sorry that Wounded Knee happened. It was nothing else. And there's stories like that, throughout Native American history. Here's some things that I want you to see. On the Pine Ridge Reservation, there's 500 kids a year that commit suicide on the Pine Ridge Reservation. 3 years ago, I had a pastor call me from Montana. And the thing he said was, pray for our group, because we're going to meet with a family. There was a little girl that was younger than anybody in here. She was like 12 years old. She rode her horse. There's still a lot of horses being rode out west. She rode her horse to a tree, threw the rope around it, and put the rope around her neck and kicked the horse, and it ran out from under, and she hung herself. There's 500 people a year that commit suicide on the Pine Ridge Reservation. Now we sit and we think, well, 500 is not really that many, is it? When there's less than 20,000 people that live on the Pine Ridge Reservation, that's a lot. That's a whole lot. Unemployment rate on a reservation is 90%. So 9 out of 10 people don't have a job. So how do families make it? How do they make it? Per capita income, $7,773 a year. That's what they're living on. I don't know anybody really that could live on $7,773 a year. It's virtually impossible. Dropout rates in the high schools is 70%. 7 out of 10 high school kids are dropping out. Last year it got so bad, speaking of poverty level, 92%, it got so bad they had no food. The winter, they had a worse winter last year than they've had in a long time. And they couldn't get out to get wood. The snows came. The snow drifts were as high as the houses. It was terrible. And they were burning their clothes in the stoves just to stay warm. It's the worst year they've had in forever. And the population is 18,834. That was as of 2021. 2023 now, I'm thinking there's around 20,000 on the reservation. The reservation itself is the size of Rhode Island. So you think about the size of Rhode Island and 20,000 people, it's very sparsely populated. So you may go 10 miles before you even see a house. Some areas in the you get to the Badlands and some of that area, you may go 20, 25 miles and not see anything. I mean, it's shortest life expectancy in the Western Hemisphere, same as Afghanistan and Somalia. The life expectancy for the men is 45 years old. I would have been gone 19 years ago on average if I left at 45. But that's a life expectancy. Diabetes, 800% higher than average in the United States. 800%. Liver disease death is 13 times higher than U.S. average. Average life expectancy, 45 years. 85% alcoholism rate. It's terrible. And you know, a lot of people don't like to hear it, but the Native Americans were given alcohol by the white people. They brought it over and they wanted to trade. They brought blankets that were infested with diseases and they wanted to trade. It's just another way of destroying the Native American. Infant mortality is 5 times the U.S. rate. 2.3% of the United States right now is Indian land. At one time it was 100%. So if this was the United States right here and was all Native American land, now it's just this right here. It's all gone. This guy right here taught me a lot of what I do know about the Native American culture. And I wished I had paid more attention when he was teaching me, but I didn't because I was a kid and I thought I knew everything. And I had other things I wanted to do. We go to North Carolina to the Cherokee Reservation. By the way, this is my dad. He passed away in 1990. And we'd go to North Carolina and he'd preach at the Baptist church and try to teach us all about everything. And I want to run down in the creek or crawdads to catch. Now I can sit here and say, I wish I'd paid a little bit more attention and I'd know a little bit more. Now I've got to research everything and hunt and go to I've probably been to 30 different reservations. And every time I go, I definitely make sure I round up some elders and sit and talk and learn about their culture. I mean, whether it's the Crow Reservation or the Pine Ridge Reservation or wherever. And then I can tell them about the Cherokee and, just different ideas to each other. I plan on going to about 10:15. It's already 10:20, so we went over a little bit. But I wanted to leave time, too, for question and answers. Questions, definitely, and I hope I have the answer. If not, I might call Mr. Jenkins or Mr. Parsons or somebody out there. Okay. Grover was asking about the lady that, she was Lakota, that he wanted to know what year it was that she was in the boarding schools. And it would have been in the early 1900s. So probably, the last boarding school closed, I think, Grover, around 1945. And I'm thinking she would have been in the early 1900s when she was like 6, 7 years old. That would have been close to the same time. There were several boarding schools that these kids were sent to, and there was a period of time that from here to here that's all they did. They pulled the Native American kids out of the homes and sent them to those. So that would have been probably the early 1900s too. Her son lives in Nebraska right now and has done some Native American stuff that's on display in Washington, D.C. And I can't think of what his name is right off the top of my head, but you can go on YouTube and hear some of his stories, and he'll tell you a lot about them too.
What tribe was your father from?
Cherokee.
Cherokee.
Yeah.
Was he raised there?
No, he was raised in Syersville, Kentucky. So,
Then what were the tribes locally here? Do you know what tribes in this southeastern part of Ohio or in Kentucky and West?
well, of course, Shawnee. Now, Cherokee extended to this area for hunting grounds. Now, there was none. I mean, most of the Cherokee lived in Alabama, South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee, but their hunting grounds extended all the way down through here. So you'd see a lot of Cherokee down through here. Then some of the older tribes, the Ottawa, and a few of them had some ties to this area. But you think of this area, mostly you're going to think Shawnee and Tecumseh, which these kids know a little bit about Tecumseh because our great history teachers take them to see Tecumseh every year. Yeah.
I stepped out for a second. You may have talked about this, but reservations, I saw some of the facts up there. I always hear comments about why reservations still exist. Why are they important? Can you share your experience and then why reservations are?
Well, my experience living on the Cherokee reservation, you have the 5 tribes that are east of the Mississippi: Cherokee, Choctaw, the Chippewa, the Seminole, and the Creek. They do a little better. The casinos have made them a lot of money. The Seminole, they own every Hard Rock Cafe except the original one. So there's a lot of money for those tribes. But then when you go out west, there's nothing. We're building a church on the Rosebud Reservation, and if you go there, you're going to find a Subway, a Family Dollar, a little gas station, and that's about it. These kids have no movies to go to. If they want to go to the mall, they have to go to Rapid City, which is 2.5 hours away. I mean, imagine if these kids could just imagine the closest mall would be going to Cincinnati. I mean, it's not right across the bridge to Ashland. If you want to go, it's really terrible on the reservations, and there's just no industry because nobody will come in because there's not enough people for one, and there's no money, so there's nothing really good. Anybody else got any questions? Again, it's Native American Month, so I bet you I would be willing to bet. And you know, Mr. Pleasance, I would say a lot of people in here have Native American blood and they don't know it. Yeah. His question was, he wanted to know why the Army was so aggressive towards the Native Americans. And the reason being was they wanted the land. They wanted the resources that were in the land. They wanted the gold. And like I said, even to this day, November 3rd, 2023, they're in the Black Hills today mining uranium. I mean, it's greed, all about greed, all about the dollar bill. Yep.
Is there any mission trips that goes there? Anybody do mission trips? You said they're building their church.
There's nobody from here that, except me, that goes up there for that. Now, the guy that was just sitting right behind you was Rob Hale. He's the pastor of our church at First Nazarene. And we have done a mission trip to Cherokee. And then I've done mission trips to Choctaw and just all kinds of different reservations. But as far as the Rosebud where we're building a church, it's pretty much me and 5 or 6 people that live up there that's trying to get it built.
Is there anything that anybody in our area could do to help donate?
Well, they used to send a big truck in, and we would send clothes back and food and everything. But then when the price of gas or diesel went so high, they couldn't send it in anymore. So we're hoping eventually someday that will come down, and we can start getting trucks back in where we can load them and send them up to the reservation.
Just make sure we know.
Oh, yeah. What can the church do to help on the reservations? Okay. All the suicide rates. A lot of prayer. Because, I mean, there's just these kids with nothing to do. They turn to drugs. The area where we're building a church at now, there's probably 65% of the homes are boarded up because of meth use. I mean, they're just, you can't even touch them. And it's because there's no outlet. There's no movies to go to. There's no restaurants to go eat at. So the church we're building, we're going to move the church we're at now up there into the church we're building. We're going to turn the other church into like a little youth center. Maybe give some of them a chance to get off the street and at least have something to come to.
Would you have any suggested reading or resources for people to look into after this?
One of the best books I ever read, and I have some books out there if you guys want to look at them, just make sure you don't pick them up and carry them off, is about Zinkala Nooney. It's called The Lost Bird of Wounded Knee. And unbelievable story. I mean, it was fantastic. But that's probably the best book that I've ever read. But then there's a lot of other books out there. Anything, I like to read anything on Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse, and there's a lot of good ones, but that's definitely the best one. Where I got them? Okay. She wanted to know where I got most of the information and facts from. I get them from the reservation, from talking to the elders, coming from the people that have lived it and have lived there their whole life. And like I say, I go to Wounded Knee every year. And I've got to know a lot of the people there, people that live around the memorial there. And there's one lady, her name's Jerry Lynn Elk. And I've got a little picture of her on the table out there. She makes jewelry and stuff, and so I buy some jewelry off of her and different things. But when you can talk to the elders and the people that have experienced it, and their parents and grandparents went through it, and they had passed down the stories, that's where you get the truth at. So, and that's where most of my information will come from the people that live there. Oh, yeah. 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 Grover's asking why the Indians were the hostiles and the savages when it was the white people that were attacking them, and the reason being is the white people again wanted the land, so they were going to do whatever they needed to do, but it's hidden. That's why it's the hidden stories of Wounded Knee. Our government doesn't want you to know a lot of this because it's a black eye to the government. They don't want to answer. And Grover, they don't want to answer to the wrongs that they did. And that's why they never will. The main reason it's not taught in school, and I know our history teachers can tell you, when you take the state test, I've been teaching for almost 30 years. I've seen one Native American question, and that was all the way back on the OGT, which you guys probably don't even know what that is. That was way before your time. And it dealt with a reservation question. You don't have Native American questions on the state test. Again, because they don't want you teaching it. The truth is, your high school history books are written by white people who are going to give you their story, and they're going to leave out the Native American side of the story.